Welcome to IVF This, episode 186, IVF and Assumptive Reasoning. Welcome to IVF This. I'm your host, Emily Ginn. After 10 years of primary and secondary infertility due to both male and female factor infertility, I am now the mother to 3 beautiful miracles. I am married to my favorite person in the world. I'm a social worker, a life coach, and an IVF warrior. I'm here to teach you how to manage your mind and emotions during your IVF journey, to break free from anxiety and regain control of your life, even in the midst of infertility. I'm going to teach you how to say IVF this to how we think about, talk about, and experience infertility. Let's go. Hello, my beautiful friends. I hope you are all doing so well today. Welcome back to the podcast. We're 186-ish episodes in because we have a couple of like bonus episodes and stuff like that, which is insane to me. I checked my stats on my podcast and like downloads and stuff like that, and we're closing in on 200,000 unique downloads. I'm in shock. Usually I'm pretty good with words. When I saw that, my mouth was agape and I was stunned into silence. Something that I'm sure my husband would love to have more often, but he just needs to pull up the stats for my podcast and then he can have a moment of peace. I don't know why I'm entertaining myself more than anything. Today, we're going to talk about something that most people do. No, not most people. Everybody does it. Everybody does this. We do it all the time without even realizing, and it's something called assumptive reasoning. I tried to come up with a catchy like title because assumptive reasoning is a very like clinical term, but I couldn't figure out a way to convey what we were going to talk about without it. But I really love the topic of assumptive reasoning because it's such a human, like a universal human experience. Everybody does it, but few of us, like outside of like the clinical world and stuff, actually knows what it is, why we do it, and most importantly, the impact that it has on our emotional experience, especially when we're in the thick of IVF. So let's break it down. Assumptive reasoning is one of our brain's favorite tricks. It happens when our mind takes past experiences, patterns, or even fears and uses them to predict what's going to happen next. I did a podcast episode. This was very early on. It was probably in the first 20 episodes where I talk about how your brain can only use like user manuals from the past to kind of help you understand what's happening. That's assumptive reasoning. It's the user manual. You've gone through this experience, you felt that fear, whatever it is, and your brain's like, "Oh, we're going to do a quick tabulation, a quick calculation, and we're going to assume that this is what's going to happen next." And instead of waiting for more information, our brain just tries to fill in the blanks, right? From a neuroscience perspective, because that is probably the most fascinating thing for me, is your brain's just trying to be efficient. I did a podcast episode called the Motivational Triad, where I talk about the only 3 things that your brain is interested in, which is avoiding pain, seeking pleasure, and trying to be as efficient as possible. Assumptive reasoning is, by definition, your brain trying to be as efficient as possible. Brains are like prediction machines. They're constantly scanning for patterns and trying to save you time and energy by saying, "Oh, I've seen this before. I know how this ends." And honestly, in a lot of areas of life, it's a pretty good thing. If you've touched a stove once, your brain remembers it and assumes every glowing burner is dangerous. That's a protective mechanism. It's really important for us. But for the emotional roller coaster of infertility and IVF, assumptive reasoning gets messy because your brain isn't just pulling from facts. It's also pulling from fear, disappointment, and grief. So let's say you spot 8 days past transfer. Your brain doesn't just register spotting. It goes straight to, I've spotted before, and that was a cycle that failed. Therefore, ergo, this cycle must be failing too. Or it can be the inverse, right? I spotted it 8 days post-transfer last time, and I had a positive pregnancy test, so this is a good sign. Or let's say you start testing early, peeing on literally any stick in sight. And one day the line looks darker, the next day it looks lighter. Your brain takes that tiny piece of information, spins a whole story. This must mean I'm losing it, or this definitely didn't work. Maybe you compare your cycles, right? Last time I had sore boobs, I got pregnant. This time I don't have sore boobs, so clearly it didn't work. Do you see the pattern that emerges, right? Your brain is taking one or two pieces of input, a cramp, a symptom, a faint line, or even an absence of symptoms, and it jumps to a conclusion. It assumes it knows the ending to this story. The problem is IVF and pregnancies don't follow predictable patterns. Each cycle is its very own story. Each embryo, each bodily response, each transfer is different. Your brain doesn't like that kind of uncertainty, right? So it leans in to assumptions to create the illusion of certainty. And that's what makes assumptive reasoning such a tricky thing. It feels totally logical. It feels like truth, but it's really just your brain's best guess based on very limited and or very biased data sets. Why do we do this, right? Why do our brains lean so hard into assumptive reasoning? Because at its core, your brain hates uncertainty. Uncertainty feels dangerous. From an evolutionary standpoint, sitting in the unknown meant you were at risk. So your brain developed this incredible ability to predict, to fill in the gaps, and to give you the illusion of safety. Like our brains are the most incredible things. Your brain is wired for pattern recognition. It is constantly looking for cause and effect relationships, even at their flimsiest, right? It wants shortcuts because shortcuts save energy. Instead of analyzing every new situation from scratch, your brain grabs onto like old templates and said, yep, I know how this goes. I know exactly how this goes. So here's a metaphor. Imagine you're standing on the side of a river and you want to cross. You look at the ground underneath your feet. It's solid, stable, and perfect for building a bridge. So you assume the ground on the other side of the river is just as solid. You build the bridge, and only when you reach the end do you realize the other side is like marshy or unstable. That's exactly how assumptive reasoning works. From the side you're on, with the limited information you have, it feels completely logical. But you can't actually see the other side until you get there. So in IVF terms, you assume a cramp means another failure because last time that's what it meant. You assume the faint line means it isn't working because you saw the same thing on your friend's test, or you saw it on Instagram. You followed someone who had a similar story with line progression. You assume that 3 failed transfers means it will never work because that's the pattern you can see from where you are, from your vantage point. But those assumptions are just the bridge your brain builds to escape the uncertainty of not knowing. And sometimes the other side doesn't hold. And here's the emotional layer. Your brain isn't trying to hurt you, it's trying to protect you. It has a very ass backwards way of doing that. But by assuming the worst, you kind of can feel prepared. Like you're never fully prepared. There's no way for you to be fully prepared for grief or loss, but you get to feel prepared. And that's a really important distinction. By assuming the best, you feel reassured. Either way, your brain's attempt to avoid the ache of uncertainty. Now, here's the hard truth about assumptive reasoning. It's not built for accuracy. It's built for efficiency. It gives you a story, not necessarily the true story. That means there are some real limitations when we rely on it too heavily, especially in IVF, right? The data set is too small. Your brain is pulling from a handful of experiences, maybe a couple of cycles, maybe one friend's story, maybe something you read on a forum. It's tiny bias sample size. Yet your brain probably tends to treat it like universal law. It creates the false certainty. Assumptions feel like truth, but they're not. They're placeholders. And when the outcome doesn't match the assumption, the crash can be really hard, sometimes even harder. It rehearses pain that hasn't happened yet. I talk about that a lot, the rehearsal of pain that we experience. Even when your assumptions turn out to be right, like let's say a negative, you're assuming the beta is going to be negative, it doesn't really soften the blow. You've just lived the heartache twice, right? Once in your imagination, and then again when it's your reality. And the fourth limitation of assumptive reasoning, it keeps you locked in past patterns. When you assume the future will look like the past, you close yourself off to the possibility of something new. You carry old pain into new cycles, which is a human thing, but it makes it harder. So, yes, assumptive reasoning is super efficient, but efficiency isn't always helpful. It's like letting GPS autocomplete a destination. You meant to go to Elm Street, but your brain decided you must have meant Elmhurst Street, and now you're way off course. Okay? So, one of the things that I really am trying to reconnect with, and I've spent a lot of time over the last several months, is my intuition. And a lot of people confuse assumptions versus intuition. So, if assumptive reasoning is one way our brain tries to navigate uncertainty, the alternative is intuition. And let me be clear, I don't mean intuition in like this fluffy, just manifest it, the secret kind of way. I mean it in a grounded sense, that quiet, embodied knowing that comes from within you. If assumptive reasoning lives in our heads, intuition lives in our guts. If assumptive reasoning screams, intuition whispers. And here's the tricky part for a lot of us, though. Most of us, it doesn't feel natural to listen to our intuition at first. Not only just because of the screaming versus the whispering, but we're used to living in our heads. We're used to the assumptions. When we say tune into your intuition, you might think, hell, I don't even know what that feels like anymore. I can't even trust it because it's misled me in the past. Now I'll ask you, was it the intuition that misled you in the past, or was it the assumptive reasoning that has misled you in the past? And it makes complete sense, right? Most of us have been taught from a very young age to second guess ourselves, whether through trauma, socialization, or repeated heartbreak of infertility itself. So much of this journey and our experiences have taught us not to trust our body. And because assumptive reasoning is so familiar, it will often feel like it's the quote unquote right answer. In fact, here's kind of where it gets even messier. Assumptive reasoning sometimes is right. You may spot at 8 days post transfer, and that may mean a negative. You may test early, and the faint line does disappear. But here's the question, and this is really the only question I'm interested in. Does being right actually help you? Did it protect you from heartache? Or did it just add more suffering by making you live that pain twice, once in your assumptions and again in the actual outcome? That's the core limitation that we're talking about. Assumptive reasoning might give you a guess, sometimes even a correct one, but it doesn't connect you to yourself. It doesn't anchor you in your body or soothe your nervous system, or really help you navigate this experience in a self-compassionate way. Intuition, on the other hand, is that quieter presence that doesn't demand certainty. It doesn't need to scream or rush. It's more like a whisper of like, here's what feels true for me right now. So yeah, there's going to be a learning curve. If you're used to listening only to the loudest voice in the room, your head, the anxious, the assumptive one, it will take practice for you to notice the softer, steadier voice within. But that is, and when I tell you I have done so much work on this the last 8 months, year, that is the work worth doing. Because reconnecting to your intuition isn't about making better predictions. It is about rebuilding trust with yourself. So how do you start practicing? That's a great question. I would love to tell you. How do you tell the difference between assumption and intuition? Pause. You have to pause. The first step has to be allowing yourself to pause. When you're pausing, you're able to name it. When you hear yourself, I know what this means. Stop, slow down, and ask yourself, am I making an assumption or am I listening to my intuition? Am I listening to my gut? Maybe notice the tone. That was a big thing for me. Assumption is loud and anxious and urgent, right? It needs you to believe this and like shaking its fist at you. It needs you to believe that this is right. Intuition is quieter, calmer, often feels a little bit more like a gentle nudge. Um, Journal it out. I always have a little caveat when I talk about journaling. Journaling, I think, is a fantastic mindfulness activity. I do it. I encourage my clients to do it. If journaling is not something that helps you, like if you feel worse after you journal or if you just dread journaling, and I don't mean like I don't know what to journal, I mean I don't want to look at this, then journaling is not going to be helpful. So take this one out if that doesn't work for you. But journaling can help you start asking yourself, what am I assuming now? And then follow it with, well, if I set down the assumptions, what do I notice in my body? You can still ask yourselves those questions without writing them down, but those are the questions that I want you to ask yourself. Try to ground into your body as much as possible. Place your hand on your chest, which is probably my favorite self-soothing mechanism, or putting your feet on the ground, going outside, bare feet on the grass, things like that. Bringing your awareness down from your racing thoughts into your body, asking, what is my gut trying to tell me right now? And lastly, I want you to hold your assumptions so lightly, right? Your brain will always make assumptions. You're not getting out of this. It is okay, right? This is an evolutionary thing that allows us to do the types of things that we do every single day. Like, think if you had to think through every single thing you did, right? Whether it's heating up your morning oatmeal, grabbing your coffee, driving to your work, or whatever. If you had to think through everything, you would be exhausted by 45 minutes after you got out of bed. Okay. Assumptive reasoning is necessary. It is an important thing, but it is not the only thing, right? So hold them lightly. I want you to remember an assumption is not truth. So instead of saying something like, this means it didn't work, try, I notice that my brain is trying to tell me that it didn't work, but I want to check in with myself first. The goal isn't to stop assumptions. It's more to hold them loosely so you can leave space for the intuition to come through, for you to feel that connection with yourself or reconnection with yourself. So here's what I want you to take from today's episode, okay? Assumptive reasoning is normal. It is not a character flaw. It's just your brain's way of trying to protect you, trying to save you from the uncertainty that feels unbearable in this IVF process. But it's also limited. It's imperfect. When it gets it right, quote unquote, it doesn't usually spare you from pain. It just makes you live it twice. And when it gets it wrong, it robs you of the peace that you could have had in those in-between moments. Not just peace, because you're going to feel other emotions, but peace is always a possibility in those in-betweens when we're not relying so much on assumptive reasoning. Intuition, on the other hand, is always there. It's always whispering to you whether you can hear it or not. Even if it feels faint, even if you've learned to distrust it or even tune it out, even if life has taught you to silence it, it doesn't demand certainty. It doesn't scream. It doesn't rush. It whispers. It grounds. It connects you back to yourself. So the invitation this week is not to banish assumptions. That's impossible. It's simply to notice them and hold them lightly and then ask yourself, what if I listened for the whisper instead of the scream? What if I reconnect with myself, even just for a fleeting moment? Let's be honest. IVF takes a lot out of you. Your time, your money, your emotional bandwidth, but your intuition, that's yours. That's yours. It's always been yours. And even here in the midst of maybe the most uncertain time of your life, you can still practice it, returning to it. And that, my beautiful friends, is what I have for you this time. Until next time, be gentle with yourselves and have a great time. I'll talk to you soon. Bye. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of IVF This. If you like what you've heard, click subscribe and follow to make sure you don't miss an episode. And if you want to learn more, head over to www.ivfthiscoaching.com to learn how to work together.